What if the reason your habits never stick has nothing to do with how disciplined you are? What if the problem is actually the way you've been trying to build them? Most people try to change their life by changing their goals, but the people who actually transform, they change their systems. This video is going to show you exactly how to build good habits and break bad ones using one of the most powerful books on human behavior ever written. If at all you're new here, this is the space where we discuss books that shape how you think, how you work, and how you live. And this is the second book of our book club series, Atomic Habits by James Clear. If at all you missed the first one, I'll be linking that above. Atomic Habits isn't really about overnight transformation. It's about how tiny actions, repeated consistently, slowly shape your identity, your routines, and eventually your entire life. James Clear called this the 1% rule. Small habits compounding over time to give the remarkable results. And in this video, we'll be covering 4 things: the nature of habits, why system beats goals, 4 laws of behavioral change, and finally the Goldilocks rule. Think about the habits you have right now, not the ones you wish you had, but the ones you actually have. Maybe it is checking your phone first thing in the morning or reading 10 pages of book before bed. Now, here's the thing about habits. They don't really care whether they are good or bad, but they just keep running on autopilot every single day. Missing one workout doesn't ruin your health. Ordering takeout once doesn't ruin your finances. But when small actions repeat every single day, they slowly become the direction of your life. And that is why habits are like double-edged sword. As James quotes, good habits make your time ally and bad habits make your time enemy. In the same way money compounds through interest, habits compound through repetition. Now, the same compounding that builds greatness can also quietly build the worst version of yourself. And that is why the choice of which habits we feed matters so much more. Because habits aren't just things you do, they become who you are. Another idea from the book that really stayed with me is this quote: you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Because the truth is, everyone has goals, but what separates people is the systems they repeat daily. Think about it this way. Every footballer in the World Cup final wants to win. Same goal, but only one team goes home with the trophy. The difference wasn't the goal, it was the system. The training schedule, the recovery routine, the small daily drills that nobody sees but everyone feels on the pitch. So stop obsessing over the destination and focus on building the road. Create systems in your workflow that can bring you the desired results. Alright, this is the part I've been waiting to get to: the 4 laws of behavioral change. Now, basically, this is the practical engine of the entire book. Now, here, James Clear breaks down how every habit formation is based on this one framework called habit loop. The cue is what triggers the behavior, the craving is the desire behind it, the response is the action itself, and the reward is the benefit your brain receives afterward. Once you understand this loop, habits stop feeling random and you realize that they can actually be designed. The first law of behavior changes make it obvious, and the first step is awareness. See, most of our habits run on autopilot, and we have never taken time to notice them. And so James suggests something called a habit scorecard. You write down every single thing you do from the moment you wake up. Once you know your habits clearly, you can start designing new ones with precision. James calls this an implementation intention. Instead of saying I'll exercise more, you have to be more specific. For example, I will go for a 20-minute walk at 7 a.m. in my local park. Because vague intentions might fail, but specific plans stick. Also, James talks about something called habit stacking. You attach a new habit to one you already have. For example, after I make my coffee, I will read one page. After I sit at my desk, I will write 3 priorities for the day. You hijack an existing habit and chain a new one to it. And that's how the habit gets into your daily life without you having to find willpower from the scratch. And if you want to break the bad habit, invert the law. Make it invisible. Remove the cues. If at all you are trying to stop doom scrolling at night, keep your phone in another room before sleeping. And if you are trying to cut back on snacking, don't buy the snacks. If you cannot see it, you cannot act on it. And the second law of behavior changes: make it attractive. Here's the science behind this. Habits are driven by dopamine, and dopamine doesn't just spike when you get the reward, it also spikes when you anticipate it. So the key is pairing a habit you need to do with something you actually want to do. James Clear called this temptation bundling. For example, only listen to your favorite podcast while walking and only watch your favorite show while folding laundry. And suddenly the habit becomes something you look forward to. And the other powerful lever here is your social environment because we mimic the people around us. So join a club and find an online community of people building the same habit. Surround yourself with people for whom your desired behavior is already normal. And to break a bad habit, invert the law again. Make it unattractive. Instead of romanticizing a bad habit, try to highlight its negative effects. For example, every hour you scroll in the bed late at night, it isn't just really fun, it's actually stealing tomorrow's energy. And sometimes changing the story around a habit is actually changing the behavior itself. The third law of behavior change is quite simple, and maybe that's why most people underestimate it. Make it easy. We tend to think the amount of time we spend on a habit is what matters, but James argues it's actually about repetition and not time. You want to reduce the friction between you and your good habit as much as possible. Lay your gym clothes out the night before, keep your journal on your desk. The easier something is, the more likely we are to repeat it. And that's why James Clear recommends the 2-minute rule. Shrink the habit until it feels almost impossible to fail. Instead of reading 30 pages, start with just one page, and instead of doing a full workout, start with a 2-minute stretch. Because starting is always the hardest part. Once you are in motion, continuing becomes easy. And to break a bad habit, invert the law again. Make it difficult by adding friction. For example, if you want to decrease your scrolling time, log out of social media so every time you have to log back in. And if you're trying to eat healthy, do not keep any sugary snacks at home. And here's the final law of behavior change. Make it satisfying. But here's the problem with most of the good habits. You do the work, like real good hard work, but the reward comes later, like way later. For example, you do the workout today, but you don't see results for weeks, and you just finish writing a book, but it will take months or years to get it published. But our brains are wired for immediate rewards, and so you have to give yourself one. A small, immediate positive reinforcement, like a bite of chocolate after a good workout. One of the most simplest but powerful tools for this is a habit tracker and the psychology behind why it works. For example, Jerry Seinfeld, one of the greatest comedians of all time, used to put a big red cross on his calendar every day he wrote one joke. After a few days, he had a chain, and the only job then was not to break the chain. It's simple, but it works because it is satisfying to see the progress. And when you miss, because you will, the rule is never miss twice. And to break a bad habit, invert the law one last time. Make it unsatisfying. For example, get an accountability partner. Tell someone what you are trying to quit and ask them to call you out or go public like I did in my last video. Because when there are social stakes, you just show up differently. One final idea I love from this book is the Goldilocks rule. Human brains love a challenge, but only if it is in the optimal zone of difficulty. If it is too easy, we get bored, and if it is too difficult, we can quit. But sustainable growth usually happens in that middle space where we feel stretched but not overwhelmed. So, as you build your habits, check in with yourself. If it is too easy, push it slightly more. If it is difficult, scale it back a little. Find a zone that is challenging but also manageable because that's where the magic lives. And that's what keeps you going long enough for the compounding effect to kick in. Alright, let's bring it all together. In order to build any good habit, you need to make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And to break any bad habit, you need to make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. So here's my question for you. What is one habit you've been trying to grow or break for a long time with zero to little success? Drop it in the comments below and I would love to know what you're working on. And if you want to go deeper on why even tiny efforts every day matters, I'm making a video exactly on that. So please stay tuned. And if at all you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It means a world to me.